Zokta Helebegamor. Shotaf Noras Esa. So the Mishnah told us a story where somebody had a property with olive trees along the river, and the river flooded and washed out and uprooted some olive trees. They floated downstream and they ended up lodging on somebody else's property, and they started to grow there. Now we know the halacha is that if you have a tree that's planted, the first 3 years that it produces pears, those pears are arla, and you're not allowed to eat them. What if you have a tree that was around for a long time, and then it got uprooted, and you replanted it? You restart the clock, and for the first 3 years, the pears will be arla. The only exception to that is if when you uprooted a tree, it came with a whole bunch of a big clump of earth, so it's still connected always to that earth. Then, if you replant the whole thing with the clump of earth, then it remains non-oil. I just want to say Hayoim Shiva ve'Arboim Yoim Shehem Shisha Shavuos v'Chamisha Yomim LaOmer. Today is Motzei Shabbos Parshas Bamidbar, and we're just a couple of days before Shavuos. So Amar Ula, Amar Rish Lakish, Loi Shanu. This that we say that the owner of the property gets to have 50% of the payers is Ela Shenekru Begushe. The original tree, when it got uprooted with the earth, and therefore it was not going to have to reset the clock. So once the tree planted, you're able to eat the pears right away. Now, the first 3 years, we're not talking about that. So it got replanted in the next property, and it was there for 3 years. Post 3 years, that's when the owner of the property gets a 50% share of the pears. During those first 3 years, hakoil shel balazeisim. There, all the fruit belonged to the balazeisim, and the owner of the property gets zero. Why? The owner of the tree will tell the owner of the property, "Iat notat if you would have planted a tree for the first 3 years, you wouldn't have been able to eat. So therefore, I get to eat all the pears, because even if you could say you planted these trees, you would not have been entitled to eat pears for the first 3 years." Furthermore, that doesn't make sense, because let the owner of the property say, "Iananati, had I planted a fresh tree, la'achar shalosh hava achil nalakule. After 3 years, I wouldn't have had to share anything with you. I would have had all the pears. So hashta ka'achlas palgabadoi. So now you want to claim half the pears? I don't need you at all, because I could have planted fresh, and by now, 3 years later, I would have been able to eat the pears." Ella, the way I wanted to express it is, I could tell him, "Take your tree and leave. Take your tree and get out of here." I could have done it without you. So that cannot be pshat. Eloki also Rabin Omer Rish Lakish. When Rabin came, he said in the name of Rish Lakish something different. Loi Shonu, that they split it. Elo Shenekru Bigushe. If the tree, when it was uprooted, came with a clump of earth, and therefore, when it gets replanted, we don't reset the clock, the pears are mutter. Ubesoich shalish. And the discussion is, within those first 3 years, we say that the balakaka gets to share in 50% of the pears. Once it's there 3 years, hakoil balakaka. The balakaka gets all the pears. He doesn't have to give the balazayis anything. The omerle, because he could tell the owner of the property, if he the owner of the tree, Iananati, had I planted it, had I planted a tree, after 3 years, I would have eaten everything. So I don't have to share anything with you. During the first 3 years, there I'll share with you. let the owner of the tree say, "Iat natat," if you would have planted fresh, you would have been able to eat nothing at all. Yet, hashtoka achlos, palga, badoy. Yet, during the first 3 years, you were entitled to eat half of the pears. Why? Why should you get half of the pears during the first 2 years? So, therefore, since you shared with me the pears for the first 3 years, post 3 years, I still should be able to share in the pears with you. Zok Gemara, no. The owner of the land will tell the owner of the tree, I don't need you. Because let's say I would have planted right away at the beginning of those 3 years. True, I would not have been able to eat the pears for 3 years. But Havakatini, I would have planted small saplings. If I only planted small saplings, you know what I could have done? Vizarana techusayu silkaviyaka. I could have planted vegetables around that tree that would have grown nicely that I would have been able to use. So you didn't save me anything from the fact that during the first 3 years I had pears. Because had I not had your pears, I could have planted a fresh tree and they would have had vegetables. So I didn't benefit from you. And since I didn't benefit from you, I don't have to share anything with you after the 3 years. And during the first 3 years, you have to share with me. Tana, we learned. What happens if Amar Halah Zesi Aninoito? What if the owner of the tree says, you know what? I'm going to uproot the tree from your property and I'm going to take it back to my property. He's not allowed to do that. The owner of the property can say, no, you got to leave the tree here. I'll pay you what I would have had to pay, share it in nurseries to buy a tree. But you're not allowed to take this tree away. My time, why not? We never want to uproot any trees in Eretz Yisrael. Trees are there, you don't uproot them. Now that's a big finish. You need big places to make such a ruling. Omer B'Yirmiyah Kagoyin Da, to make a psak like that, you need a serious choshev yid like Rabbi Yochanan. Only Rabbi Yochanan could have made such a psak halacha, and because of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, forbid somebody from uprooting that tree. It's not awesome. If we're talking about protecting Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, we have another Mishnah on the same subject. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Hamakabel sidei avoy sof min hanach." A guy had a field that belonged to a person's fathers. What does it mean, a person's fathers? Let's leave that undefined for now. The Gemara is going to discuss that. So someone makes a sharecropping agreement with a guy and says, I'll cultivate the property and we'll say that I get a third. I will get a third of the pears and you'll get 2/3 of the pears. The halacha is ma'aser v'noisel. You would think I take my chelik, my third, and I have to take my share from that. The 2/3 that I don't take goes to you, and I don't get to worry about it. But that's not the halacha. The halacha is from my 1/3. Not only do I have to separate trumas and maasros on my third, I also have to separate trumas and maasros for the whole property, even for the produce that the goyim are going to get. Svarua, Zok, at first glance, this is how we would explain this mission. My steyavoiso. What is the definition of steyavoiso? Eretz Yisrael. It just means if the goyim have the property in Eretz Yisrael and you made a sharecroppers agreement with a goy, you're mechuyev to take off all the maasros, and we'll soon see why. Now, my karla steyavoiso. Why are we referring to any property in Eretz Yisrael as the property of our fathers? Because it's Sidei Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. So Eretz Yisrael we refer to as Tevois. Vikasava. What is the reason why there should be a Chiyav Maasros? First of all, Ein Kinyan L'Nachi Eretz Yisrael Afkim Edei Maasros. If a goy had a koyach to be koina a field, and it's a goy's field in Yansen, then there won't be a Chiyav Trumas and Maasros on the goy's field. But the Mishnah must hold that in fact there would be a Chiyav of Trumas and Maasros Araisa, even though the goyim are in control of the property. Now, really, if I'm a sharecropper, why would I have to take off trumas and maasros for your share? For my share, I have to take off trumas and maasros. Why do I have to take off for the goy's share? The teretz is because there's two types of sharecroppers. There's a sharecropper where I get a portion, third. There's also a sharecropper It's not really a sharecropper. It's where I pay a fixed amount. It's literally like I'm leasing a field. I'm going to give you $10,000 and I keep all of the payers. In such a case, all the payers belong to the Yid, and therefore, midaraisa, he's mechuyev to take off ma'aser from them. And if he's not going to take off ma'aser from them, and he's going to pay the $10,000 out of tevel, technically what he's doing is he's using trumas and maestras to pay his rent. That's not allowed. But if he's just a sharecropper taking a portion, there he's talking not getting the other chelik, so it shouldn't be a problem. But vibal midai had he been a choiker, midai he would have to be mafresh trumas and maestras. Therefore, we'll make a gzeira umekabel kechoikerdom. If you're only taking part of the produce, the rest goes to the goy. There, ikra din, I wouldn't have to be ma'asher the goy's chelik. But al gzeira, since a choiker would be mechuyev deraisa, the mekabel for a sharecropper for a portion of the yield, that midarabanan were mechayev him to take trumas and maestras.
And that's even in these days.
In Eretz Yisrael, yes. So ma choiker bein ovad u bein lo ovad by yisurei umetinlei. Just like by a choiker, where midaraisa, I'm paying you rent, all the product is mine. It's mechuyev and trumas and maestras midaraisa, because ein kinyan al nachri be'eretz Yisrael of give me a meiser. Therefore, and why does he have to pay the chipareya chayvasai dummy if he would give the guy the $10,000 worth of fruit without being mafresh trumas and maestras? It's literally like he's using trumas and maestras to pay his rent. So therefore, midarabanan af mekabel nami, if he's only taking a portion of the yield and the rest of the yield goes to the owner, kipareya chayvasai dummy will also consider it like pareya chayvasai midarabanan, and therefore ma'aser v'noisen. So that was the Gemara's first thought of the reasoning why the Mekabel Soda from a goy in Eretz Yisrael would be mechuyev to be mafresh trumas and maestras. But Rav Kahana doesn't like it. Amalei Rav Kahana Rav Papi, but Amar lo Rav Zvid. Based on this shot that you're saying, we're going to have a problem with a brisa. Elohad Tanya. We have a brisa that says Rabbi Yehuda Omer, a Mekabel stay avoisav mimeitzik nachi. A meitzik nachi isn't even somebody who has it lawfully. He came with a gun and he told you, get off the land. So that's not even a kinyan at all. What does the bride say? Maaser b'noisen. If a yid works in such a property, he has to be mafresh maestras. Now, there, the guy doesn't even own it. So, Frank the Gemara, my area matzik. Why did the bride say a smaller chiddush, where the guy doesn't own it? And that's why I'm mechuyev to be mafresh trumas and maestras. Based on what we learned in the Mishnah, I feel ein matzik nami. Even if the guy bought it and is operating it legally, you also have to be mafresh trumas and maestras. So why would the bride say such a small chiddush of matzah, where technically we still belong to eat? So because of that, we have to reverse the pshat that we said. There would be no reason to make any gzeira, because in fact, if a guy owns the property, instead of Yosy, near Yisrael, it's part of a ma'aser, and there would be no reason to be mechayev, the person doing the sharecropping, to be mafresh trumas and maestras for the whole field. And even if you want to hold ein kinyan nachi, but a mekabel av kechagedom, we don't make a gzeira from mekabel to chayker. A mekabel is not mechuyev to be master the shchilik of the guy. But the case is a different case. Umay stay a voice of, it doesn't mean any field in Eretz Yisrael. It means stay a voice of mamish. It means a field in Eretz Yisrael that once upon a time belonged to this man's father. And since it once belonged to his father, even though my ikra din, he shouldn't be mechuyev to meiser the guy's part, it's a knas. They counted him. We're going to soon see what did he do wrong that he deserves this knas. But the katsur rabbanon, they counted him. The idea the fact of the matter is, a normal sharecropper, let's say the going rate is a third, that he takes a third and the owner takes 2/3. This is his family's land. He really wants to work on the family land. It's nostalgic. His father was there, his grandfather was there. So he'd be willing to make a deal with the landowner, the goy, to take even a quarter. The ID the chaviva latvei ve'ozel the ID chaviva latvei ve'ozel mekabel. He'll give the guy a better deal than typical and take less, and we don't want him to do that. And we'll soon see why we don't want to do it. I will inish the alma. Anybody else who sharecropped that field wouldn't have to take measures, like because he doesn't care to give the guy a better deal. Frank Gemore, but Lamaita, what's the reason for the knas? Ulidi day my time to Why did I cancel? The fact is, we don't like that goyim have property in Eretz Yisrael. So if we give him a decent arrangement to share a crop, he'll continue to do it. But if we make him be mafresh trumas or for the whole field, that's a lot of money. It will prompt him to just buy the field. He'll find the money and he'll buy the field back. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we make him pay a lot. If anybody else did it, they wouldn't care. If I have to take off my interest, they're not going to lease this field. They'll go make a sharecropper agreement with a different field. But we're concerned about the child of the original owner of this field. He'll take a bad deal because he wants to work on this field. To discourage him from that, we make him pay so much in trumas and maishers that he'll say, you know what, I'll just buy the whole field. That's Rashi's pshat, and Tosfos is first pshat. But Tosfos is a fascinating second pshat. You know what Chazal is trying to do? They're trying to make it that nobody will want to work in this field. So most Jews, if Chazal say don't work in this guy's field, they won't. We're afraid the Yid, the actual child of the original owner, he loves this field too much. He might not listen to Chazal, and he might work anyway in the field. And therefore we discourage him by putting these sanctions on. Why don't we want him to work in the field? You know why? Because then the goyim will continue stealing fields from Eden. But if the goy won't even be able to find anybody to work the field, then the field becomes useless to him. And they'll just abandon it, and then the Yid will get it back. And then the guy won't continue stealing fields from Eden because it's not profitable for him, because nobody's going to do work, no one's going to buy it, and he'll get stuck with a useless asset. And it's for that reason that they sanctioned him, so that people shouldn't do business with the goy. So this is again a chiddush of sanctions to protect the integrity of Eretz Yisrael. Not anybody could make such a takana, only Rabbi Yochanan. Itmar. We had a machlokes. Someone who went into the field of his friend without permission, vinata, and he planted trees in a field, shaloi brishus. He wasn't asked. So does he get to be paid? Can he make any claim against the owner? Yes, he gets the claim, but he gets the claim of the lesser of the two. Either how much the field improved by, or what he paid for the improvements. The lesser of the two is what he can claim from the owner. Shmuel says, no. He gets the full price of what a normal person would pay to hire somebody to plant this field. That's what he has to pay. He gets a better deal. It's actually not a machlokes. Shmuel and Rav are talking about two different cases. Kan bisada hasuya lita. If it's a field that was designed to plant trees in, so the owner wants the trees planted there, he has to pay fair market value for this planting service. But Kan, where Rav said it's Yodel Tachtoina, is bisada shenasuya lita. This was supposed to be a wheat field. I didn't want trees in there. So therefore, I only have to pay the lesser of the two. This halacha that Rav says that if you go into someone's field who didn't want trees and you plant it, you get paid the lesser of either the improvement or the cost. Rav didn't paskin beferish. Itmar, we could figure out what Rav holds because of how he paskined in an interesting shiloh. The Huda also Rav. Somebody once came to Rav and he said, I planted trees in someone's property without permission. I want my money. So Rav said, Zil Shumlei. You know what? We're going to have to assess the value of what he did, and you got to pay it. Like Shmuel's psak. But the property owner says, I didn't want the trees. I didn't want the trees. Oh, okay. So then he said, Zil Shumlei. So then pay the lesser of the two. So this is the Mechol Itma. But Amar Labina, I don't want the trees. I don't want the trees. Why should I pay anything? Anyway, L'soif, Chazia, the Godrova come into it. Later on, Rav saw that this guy was lying. He didn't want the trees because he started enhancing them and working on them. So he wanted the trees. And he was just claiming that he didn't want them because he didn't want to have to pay. Oh, so then Rav told him, so you want those trees? Now you got to pay full pop. Pay the guy who planted it full pop because clearly you did want it. You were just lying that you didn't want it because you wanted to avoid pay. Idmar, you went into a broken down house, and you built up the house without getting permission from the owner. He wanted to get paid, the guy wouldn't pay him. So he told the guy, I'm taking my stuff back. I'll unbuild your house. I'll take back all my building materials. You listen to me, you can do that. Frank Gemara Meisvei. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says that this shaila is a machlokes Beishamai and Beisil. Beishamai Rabbi Mishayim Eloi, Beisil Rabbi Ein Shayim Eloi. And Rav Nachman paskin like Beishamai. Lamer Rav Nachman Domer ke Beishamai. Are you telling me Rav Nachman paskin like Beishamai? We don't paskin like that. Zok Gemara, no. Rav Nachman holds that both Beishamai and Beisil agree that Ein Shayim Eloi. The Omar Kiyai Tana. Who Omar Kiyai Tana? Rav Nachman learns like a different Tana. The Tanya Shayim Eloi Divrei Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Rav Shimon ben Elazar does not quote a machlokes between Beishamai and Beisil. According to the Tana, Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Beishamai and Beisil both agree that Shayim Eloi. And that's who Rav Nachman is saying like. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel said it's a machlokes. Shimon ben Gamliel Aimer Beishamai Rabim Shayim Eloi Beisil Rabim Ein Shayim. So, in fact, what is the deal with the house? Does he have to pay? Does he doesn't have to pay? Can he take the building materials back or not? Amr Rabbi Yochanan, Zok Rabbi Yochanan, and now we're going to turn on to Amud Beis. If it's a house, he's entitled to get his building materials. Besada, but if it was a field, he can't pull the trees out. Besada, my time. Why can't he pull the trees out by a sada? We never want to be uprooting trees in Eretz Yisrael. So you might ask, and we do want to destroy homes in Eretz Yisrael? So the Mefarshim speak about it. I didn't get a clear hillock, but when it comes to planting, that's something that's very serious about Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Okay, Ikadami, there's another reason why it's severe for pulling out trees, even not in Eretz Yisrael. You're going to pull your trees out. It's too late. Your trees already weakened my property because while they were there, they were sucking nourishment. Once you did that to my property, I'm entitled to hold on to your trees. My benai, what's the difference between these two reasons why you can't pull your trees out? If it happened in Chutzlords, if this far is out, Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, in Chutzlords, you should be able to pull your trees out. But if the reason why you can't pull your trees out is because it already weakened the land, well, that applies. That far applies equally even in Chutzlords. Now we're going to get into landlord and tenant issues. When you're allowed to evict, when you're not allowed to evict. Hamaskir bayis lechaveroi b'moisak shalom. Pashup pshat, and this will not be the maskana, but this is the havmin of the Gemara, that you made a lease with a guy. I'm leasing you my property, my house, for the winter months. The halach is in the yochal yitzir min hachag v'da pesach. During that lease period, you're not allowed to evict the tenant. But what if you leased a property, you leased a house to somebody for the summer months? You could throw them out in 30 days, which is interesting. Why could you terminate a lease in the middle of the summer? For what reason? If it was a big, busy city where it's very hard to find apartments, you have to let them live there for 12 months. You cannot evict them for 12 months. What if it's not a house? It's a store. No matter what, it's Shnei Masar Chodesh. And the Gemara is going to explain it's because Chanuyos give credit. And since they give credit, they need to be paid back. Now, how are they going to get paid back? People recognize the store, they come and pay back. But if he shuts the store down suddenly, the people will never be able to find him to pay him back. But if he has 12 months notice, they'll stop giving credit, and then all the residual will come in slowly, and then he can shut down. If it's a chanashal nachtaimim, with the bakery shop, or it's a voim or a dyer shop, shalai shadim, you have to give 3 years notice, and the Gemara is going to tell us because there people have very long payment terms, and people will pay up to 3 years later, and therefore you have to let them keep the shop for 3 years so people will be able to come and pay. Frank the Gemara, why is it that the Mishnah says if I leased out a property for the winter, if the deal was for the winter, it's all winter months, you can't throw them out of it. Well, if I leased it to you for the summer, why should it be any different? So why can I throw it up for 30 days? The lease is for the whole summer. In the winter, the reason why you're not allowed to terminate the lease early is because it's very hard to find another place to rent in the winter. In the winter, apartments aren't available. But in the summer, you'd be allowed to. And I believe Rashi says, it's not speaking about a long-term lease. If it's a long-term lease, during the whole period of the lease, you can't just break it. It was month to month. In a month-to-month lease, you're still not allowed to evict somebody during the winter months, but in the summer months, in the month-to-month lease, with 30 days, you could eliminate. You could have a move out. Zog to Gemara, Ema Sefer, Bikrochen. If you're in a big city, Echad Yemais Achamo, Echad Yemais Akshamim, Shnei Mas Achodesh, you have to give 12 months. The problem is, what if those 12 months happen to end up in the middle of the winter? You could throw them out. Why? Giving 12 months is not good enough because that 12 months might end in the middle of the winter and you can't throw out a guy in the middle of the winter. We're not talking about termination of leases. We're talking about notice. We're talking about how much notice you have to give somebody in a lease. If you lease somebody a lease on a month to month, there's no officially proclaimed period, defined period. You would not be able to evict him during this period of time. You have to give him 30 days notice. But it's not enough in the middle of the winter to give him 30 days notice. You have to give him 30 days notice before the winter begins. So if he's aware 30 days before the winter that you want him out, in the winter that you want him out, then you could throw him out in the winter. Tanya Namihachi, when the Mishnah says 30 days, and the Mishnah says 12 months, the discussion is not how long the lease is. The discussion is how much notice do you have to give somebody. So in a big city, you have to give them at least 12 months notice. And in a regular city, if it's b'mois hachama, it's 30 days. And b'mois hakshamim, the 30 days have to end before the b'mois hakshamim start. Those are the rules. Zog to Gemara, uchashem shemasker tzorach leidia. The same way the landlord has to give notice to a tenant if he wants to evict him, kach soicher tzorach leidia. The renter, if he wants to terminate the lease, he also has to give notice. The Omer Lei, because the vendor, the landlord will say, Iyoi daton, had you given me time and notice, I would have had time to find a good tenant. But if you just pull out at the last second, I have to scramble to find a tenant, and I might not get a good tenant. Omer Rabasi said, Im nichnas yoim echad b'yimot hakshamim, eina yochel liyotziyai min hachag bar haPesach. If the winter started, even one day, you cannot throw them out. Frank, what do you mean if the winter started one day? Well, not shloshim yom kama. You got to be 30 days before. Never mind 1 day. 30 days before you got to give him notice. So this is what it means. If after you gave him 30 days notice, the last day of the 30 days is already in the winter, then you're stuck with the tenant for the whole winter in the when the Chag Pesach. But if you gave him notice early enough that the 30 days notice is complete before the winter starts, then you can throw him. What if you can't throw a guy out? You're mechuyev to keep him there the whole winter. But you are allowed to jack up his rent. Amalei Rab Nachman, jacking up the rent is the same as throwing him out. Hi Lindkide Bekufse. Rashi says this is literally chapping him on by the beitzim and squeezing them to the shavke leglimo. So you should let go of your beged. You should let go of your lease. So letting him raise the rates is basically coercing the guy to leave. So you haven't really protected the tenant. We're not saying that you can arbitrarily raise the rent. If the going rate goes up and he's staying longer because you have to leave him there all winter until your notice expires, then at least you could demand that he pays market rents if rent goes up. No rent control. What happens if I lease somebody a house and it's already after the term of the lease? If the house collapses during the term of the lease, we're going to learn tomorrow that the landlord's got to build a new house. But what if after the lease was over, but we're during the period of time that you can't throw him out, like in the winter? Amr he does not have to build him a new house. The owner can say, "Lo yadivas minoi." Listen, if my house suddenly collapsed, I'd be stuck. Well, your house suddenly collapsed, you're stuck. I don't have to build your new house. But zavne or urte, what if the landlord sold the property, or he died and his children yashed the property, or you have Matani gave it away? So now there's a new landlord. The new landlord can't say, I don't have to stick to the arrangements that was before. I can throw you right out. Rather, the tenant can tell the new landlord, you have no more rights to throw me out than the person who you bought the property from, and therefore I still get to stay until the end of the winter. What about Kole Liberain? What if the landlord's son got married and now he needs a house to give to his child? Could he throw him out for that? So in Machazina, you have the Evshiloi Duya. If you had advance notice and you could have given him notice, then then you have to let the tenant know. And if you didn't, you don't get to throw him out. But Viloi, if it was a sudden thing that his son got married, Amr Lay, the landlord could tell the tenant, you know better than me. If this came up at the last second, I didn't have notice. Zok the Gemara, a story. Hahu Gavra, the Zovin, this is a fascinating story. Hahu Gavra, the Zovin Arba de Chamra, he bought a shipload of wine and he needed a warehouse to store them, and he couldn't find a warehouse. And then he found a woman who had some available warehouse space. Do you have a space available to rent? And I guess she didn't want to rent it. I'm sorry, I don't have. So he charmed her and he courted her and he got her to marry him. Ozal Kocha. He married her. Now that she's married to him, she loves him, she thinks he loves her. She gave her husband a place to store his wine. And what did this lowlife do who took advantage of this woman? He said, sorry, my dear wife, the honeymoon is over. He went to his house, and because of Lagita, he sent her a beautiful gift. He sent her a gift. So basically, he took advantage of her. He married her just to get the warehouse space, and then he said, after he got his lease, he said, too bad. Shadar law, he sent her the get. So, she got angry, right? They say there's no wrath as a woman scorned. What did she do? She went and hired schleppers. But how did she pay for the schleppers? She let them take wine. You know what? How much wine do you want to move his stuff out? Take whatever is the one you want and move the rest of his stuff out. She took all this stuff and dumped that out on the road. Too bad for him. Kacher also, he tried to do something sleazy like that. He is too bad for him. Surely, if this wasn't even a rental property, she was just letting him store it there. There for sure she'd allow to throw it. Even if it was a rental property anyway. So big deal. He pulled the stunt to get her to rent him rather than to another person. She still has a right to throw him out. Amalei, she could say, I would be happy renting to anybody. But the loch lo nichli. You, I don't want to rent to. The dumbest alai to me, you know what you are? Kiari arba. Like a lion ready to attack me, to pounce on me, a lion who is waiting to ambush. I don't want you. Because they give credit for a very long time, and we need to make sure that they'll be there long enough to have the people come and pay them back. Now we're going to talk about what repairs the landlord is responsible for and what repairs the tenant is responsible for. Dr. Mishnah, he has to provide a door. Binagar is the bolt that goes into the floor that to lock the door. Uveminal and the lock mechanism. Anything that's a ma'isa umen, that's called tzorech habayis, and that the master is responsible. Like changing a light bulb, hasoicher I say that the renter does. Hazevel shabalabayis, the zevel found in the yard belongs to the balabayis. The Gemara is going to give us the detail on that, so we don't need to go into it now. The aimless soicher, the only dirt that the soicher gets to keep, the leftover ashes, that they get to keep. We'll see. The Gemara is going to elaborate on that tomorrow. Taner Rabbanan. Hamasker b'ayis l'chaveroi, masker chayiv l'hamad loy dalsois, l'ftoyach lo dalsois, he has to give him doors, l'ftoyach lo chaloynois, he has to have windows there, l'chazak l'tikra, if the roof is getting weak, he has to resupport the roof, lismoich l'koyra, if a beam breaks, he has to put up a new beam, v'soicher chayiv lasois l'sulam, the soicher, he has to provide a staircase or a ladder to get up to the second floor. Lasses le'maika, to build a gate around the roof. Lasses le'mirzayv, to create eaves, so the water would drain down the roof. Instead of it running down the walls, they would put a piece of wood all the way around that brought the water further away from the wall, so it fell away from the wall. Ulatich is gaga. Not only that, he would be responsible to tar his own roof. And Rashi says that they used to have flat wooden roofs. So they would put a big clump of tar in the center of the roof, and then they would taper it down on all four sides so that any water that fell on the roof would drain off the one of the four sides. That's not a Maisa Omen, and that's something that the tenant can do on his own. Mezuzah Almi. Who's responsible to supply the mezuzah? Frankly, mezuzah? What type of shaila is that? Mezuzah is the responsibility of the tenant. Elo maka mezuzah. Anybody who's been to the outside of Eretz Yisrael, when you go into the Muslim quarter, you actually see a channel chiseled out of the stone walls where the Yidden used to have their mezuzahs. Now the Muslims, Yamach Shamam, are there. So there's no mezuzah there, but you still see those channels. That's the discussion. Who has to chisel out those channels? We have a brayso that tells us that as well. If it's not a ma'isa umin, the soicher does it himself. But chiseling out the block is a ma'isa. But you don't need to chisel out the block. You don't need to do it like that. You know what you could do? After who the gufsa, and let's turn over onto Kuf Beis Amar Aleph. Because to the Kohen, you know what he could do? He could just put the mezuzah in a reed and hang it on the outside of the wall. It doesn't have to be indented. And that anybody can do. Taner Rabbanan. If you rent a house to your friend, the soicher is to make a mezuzah. Now what when he moves out? Can he take the mezuzahs with him? You're not allowed to take the mezuzahs with you. You have to leave him there. That's if you rent it from a Yid. If you rent it from a goy, then you can't take your mezuzahs with you. There was a person who walked away with his mezuzahs, and Rahman al he suffered terrible tragedies. The kavar ushnei banav. This story. We just said if you rent from a goy, there's no issue with taking the mezuzah. And then we bring up a story where there was an issue. The story isn't coming to illustrate the halacha of the sefer, which talks about taking your mezuzah away from the house if the owner is a goy. The story is coming to illustrate the reisha that says that the house belongs to a yid, you're not allowed to take your mezuzahs off. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were zoicha to finish Daf Kuf Aleph, and Be'ez Hashem, tomorrow we're going to learn Daf Kuf Beis. I will not be here tomorrow. My shviger was nifteris over Shabbos, so I have a 6:30 a.m. flight to Los Angeles. So I'm not going to be here tomorrow, but Rabbi Yosef Chaim Mintzberg will be saying the 7 and the 9 o'clock shir tomorrow. I'm also going to actually say Kuf Beis right now because I have to record it anyway, but the shir will be tomorrow at 7. It'll also be online on Zoom just like this, and at 9 as well. And on Monday, I'm going to be saying shir remotely on Zoom. And on Tuesday, Erev Yom Tov, Be'ez Hashem, I plan to be back in Toronto. Everybody should have a good tavach. We should only share in each other's simchas.
Full of simchas, Yosy.
Amen.